Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys about a new scientific consensus that has been reached and why this consensus is very, very important right now for the fitness community. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And the reason I need to talk about this is that we're having real conversations right now about ketogenic diets. Okay? Ketogenic diets. And what I'm going to break down for people is the problem with what this data is showing versus what people who follow these diets are saying is good about their blood work. There's actually a problem here, and it's a big deal when we have guys like this Jason Whitrock. We have Brandon Carter, other people promoting ketogenic diets as health-oriented. And here's where I'm going to go with this. People are going to say, well, I'm doing it, my blood work's better. Your blood work might not be fully as better as you think it is. That's the problem. You're misinterpreting certain aspects of your blood work. And we're going to get to that in a minute as far as HDL, LDL, and triglycerides. Because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about your overall lipids in your blood. All right. And anyone who wants to argue against that, you need to listen to this whole video. If you come and you make an argument and you do not know the point I'm making, I'm just going to ban you for being a retard. I cannot stand that level of retardedness in my video comments. If you don't understand what causes HDL, LDL, and triglycerides to raise and lower, and you don't listen to what I say in this business, you don't get to have a comment. If you don't know what you're talking about, you don't get to have a comment there. So we're going to go into that in a minute. The reason we need to talk about this, though, is that we have a scientific consensus. Scientific consensus is not that common in nutrition. All right, you need to understand that. It takes a lot of evidence before a consensus is reached. And in this case, you have the European Atherosclerosis Society has made what they consider to now be a definitive statement, not correlation, but causation. And they feel now that they finally have sufficient evidence of this based upon hundreds of studies and based upon research and looking at data and comparisons between millions of people. Millions of people now who they have to look at the numbers, and they're finding that there is a clear causation between the amount of LDL in people's bloods and the rate at which they develop osteosclerosis and how severe it gets. Okay, LDL cholesterol, that's your low density. That's what some people would call somewhat bad cholesterol, and some people would call benign cholesterol. A lot of keto dieters will say, well, it's relatively benign. And it is benign in the sense of it's not considered to be a heart attack risk. And that's why ketogenic dieters tend to ignore LDL and when they talk about their diets, because they're like, well, it's not directly linked, highly correlated with immediate heart attacks. Meaning people who have really high LDL, that's not like you look at their blood work and go, man, you're at risk of a heart attack in the next year. We don't look at that and do that. What they look at is HDL to triglyceride ratio. And you know what? That is true. That's true. The ketogenic dieters actually do get that part right. A person who has a low HDL and a high triglyceride number is at very high risk of a heart attack in the near future. If you see that a doctor, a cardiologist, or a medical doctor sees blood work in which your HDL is lower than the preferred range with your triglycerides way above the preferred range, they're going to look at that and say, you are at risk of a heart attack. You have a very good chance of having a heart attack within the next year looking at these numbers. You need to fix this. And the reason ketogenic dieters tend to see good numbers there is that when you eat more fat, all your cholesterols go up. Your HDL and LDL both tend to go up, right? Because you're getting more fat in your diet. HDL tends to come from some of your better fats. People who are getting a fair amount of like omega-3 fats and stuff in your diet, your HDL tends to go up. Certain other things, like certain polyphenols and other stuff in your diet, can elevate it. Also, some of the polyphenols found in olive oil, some of the polyphenols found in red wine, things like that can also boost that good cholesterol a little bit, right? Understood. Triglycerides, the biggest impact on triglycerides is usually the amount of refined sugar, the amount of fructose in your diet. So ketogenic dieters jump up and scream, our diet lowers triglycerides. Well, so does anyone who eats a clean diet. Meaning elevated triglyceride levels generally aren't there for physically active people. People who exercise and who don't eat very much or eat very, very little refined sugars don't have high triglycerides, all right? They don't have high triglycerides usually. There are things that can, different factors involved, but usually if you want your triglyceride number to go down, don't eat a bunch of sugar. Right? Don't eat table sugar, don't eat honey, don't eat high fructose corn syrup. Your triglycerides will go down. So because ketogenic dieters don't eat refined sugars, their triglycerides tend to be low. But they interpret that as all carbs must raise triglycerides, and that's not the case. People who are eating rice and potatoes as their staple carbs and they're not dumping table sugar on everything also have low triglycerides. And people who get an acceptable amount of good fat in their diet, who are physically active, things like that, tend to have decent HDL cholesterols also. So your preventative measures there as far as diet goes, as far as the short-term risk of heart attack, can be offset just by minimizing the amount of refined foods in general you eat, right? It's not, the ketogenic diet isn't magical at doing that. You know what? People who live on chicken, brown rice, and broccoli on the bro diet actually usually have low triglycerides also. Being physically active, people who do cardio tend to have low triglycerides. Actually, people who do enough cardio can even offset the sugar intake to some extent. All right, there are people who have low triglycerides who do a lot of endurance training who still eat sugar, eat table sugar, drink soda, who actually have acceptable triglycerides. All right, so that's usually what's going on there. Now here's our problem. What we also find is there's a direct relationship with this LDL, which is what causes osteosclerosis. This is now a consensus reached. You and I and other people are not qualified to debate this. This is the top experts who specialize in osteosclerosis are looking at the data, and they are saying we have causation. Your saturated fat intake has a direct link to your LDL. Your LDL is the cause of plaque in your arteries. All right, plaque in your arteries isn't a short-term risk, meaning you can have really high LDL cholesterol for 10 years, 15 years before it starts to become a problem. But here's our problem. Because ketogenic diets change some of the blood work that affects short-term heart attack risk, people are interpreting that as, I have really good blood work. Okay, my cholesterol, total cholesterol is a little on the high side. And I want to go here, people want to say, why are you talking about dietary cholesterol? I never said dietary cholesterol. I only mention I want to see in the comments about dietary cholesterol. What I said is that I didn't say dietary cholesterol in the video other than to say I'm not talking about dietary cholesterol. I'm talking about saturated fat. They are not the same thing. Now, a lot of high saturated fat foods tend to have a lot of dietary cholesterol in them, but that isn't universally true. All right? And let's accept that fact. That's reality. There are also foods that have almost no saturated fat that do have some cholesterol. If you were to eat enough of those, you would have a lot of cholesterol in your diet while still having nearly zero saturated fat. So they're not a complete overlap. I'm talking specifically about saturated fat. We have dozens of studies showing that there is a direct relationship to saturated fat intake chronically and how high your LDL is. Now, does that mean that saturated fat in a moderate amount is bad? No. LDL, when it's within the safe range, if you have enough HDL cholesterol, your HDL is good. Slightly elevated LDL doesn't seem to cause any problems at all. None. Just like fructose. We can talk about fructose, right, being a sugar that can harm you when consumed in excess, and it does harm you in a very real and very immediate way. It's very measurable. But if you eat relatively benign amounts of it, you don't see negative effects from it. In other words, if you ate 5 bananas every day instead of a bunch of table sugar, you're not going to see negative health effects from consuming fructose. There's fructose in every one of those bananas, fructose in every apple you eat. Nowhere near the amount that's in a soda. Nowhere near the amount that's when you put 2 spoons of table sugar in your coffee every day. When you're within safe limits of any of these foods, these don't create problems. It's the excess. In excess, I mean, even when I lived in the UK, the NHS gave guidelines on what they consider to be excess, meaning how much saturated fat did you have to consume before your LDL started going up. And it was around 20 grams for women and 30 grams for men. In other words, you have to eat a pretty fatty diet to see that much. A lot of people do. Or you have to eat foods really high in saturated fat. You could do it on cheese or heavy cream. If you ate those in fairly small amounts, you might get enough saturated fat to hit that number, while on a moderate fat diet, right? But if you're eating balanced different fat sources that aren't particularly high, you would actually have to eat a fairly high fat diet to hit those numbers. The problem is that ketogenic dieters do eat excess of that usually. So people who are promoting ketogenic diets are promoting diets that we know will elevate your LDL cholesterol outside the normal range, outside the healthy range. Every one of these ketogenic dieters who get their blood work done, all of them go, my HDL is good, my triglycerides are low, therefore my blood work is good. It's amazing. Brandon Carter talking about this. We haven't seen his blood work, but that's what he's claiming, that it's amazing. So these people are promoting diets that raise your LDL to an unacceptable level. We now have consensus from a leading body in osteosclerosis that elevated LDL cholesterol is the direct cause of plaque buildup in your arteries. It's a direct cause of you needing to have a bypass surgery, to have the arteries near your heart cleaned out from that blockage. So this is pretty causative. I mean, this is fair to say that any diet that is high in saturated fat that you follow for very prolonged periods of time is going to cause plaque buildup in your arteries. It is going to cause osteosclerosis. It is going to kill you. It won't cause heart attacks in the short term, but it will kill you in the long term. And it is not healthy, and that's the problem we now have with this. This is the other reason I used to say, well, ketogenic diets, from what I can see in the data, seem to be fairly benign. Started changing my stance as more and more stuff emerged. I came off of that sort of diet when I saw more data emerging showing this. Now, when we see a piece of data like this, anyone who is following a ketogenic diet is a moron. I'm going to flat say it. When we have data like this, and I'm telling you guys as someone who came off of this sort of diet personally based upon the data, because I don't want to die of a heart attack. I don't want to die because of my diet. And I'm telling you as someone who has used this sort of diet, who is looking at the science right now, at this point with this data being released, if you stay on this sort of diet, you are a moron and you are killing yourself. You are killing yourself. You are committing suicide. You'd probably be better off just taking one of these. It'll be a quicker, less painful death. You won't have to deal with all the surgeries and stuff. Just, there's an easy way to do it. Just saying. It's no different. And these people out who are promoting this sort of diet, Brandon Carter, Jason Whitrock, even now to some extent, what's his name? I guess is Mike Rashid even talking about him now? These people are killing their followers. They are killing them. Let that sink in for a moment. Because all you ketogenic diet followers out there, when you pull your blood work, every one of you have elevated LDL cholesterol. Almost every one of you. A few exceptions, 90+% of you have high LDL levels. When I had my blood work done when I was on a keto, my LDL levels were elevated, but my triglycerides were low, so I thought I was okay. But they're not. It's not okay. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.